Right, greetings, hello. It's Thomas Daffern here again, and it's the 23rd of June. We've just had the midsummer solstice here in France and around Europe. I know many of my friends were at Stonehenge and Avebury and other sacred sites, Mitchell's Fold in Shropshire Welsh border, and up in Orkney, you know, Carnac, many people were celebrating. So for me it was a local thing here in this beautiful heartland of old Druid France, La Creuse, named after the river La Creuse, which is just a few hundred metres away from here. Beautiful sacred landscape, and this is an amazing time of year, really. So let's all celebrate it together, and let's celebrate peace. I'm going to be sharing my thoughts, as usual, on peace and the state of the world geopolitically. So I'm going to start with, I'm speaking with various, responsibilities as coordinator of the World Intellectual Forum here in Europe, which is a new body that we're setting up for thinkers around the world who want to use the power of intellect, the power of the sword of mind, prajna as it's called in Sanskrit, symbolized by the sword of truth behind me, to cut through the obfuscations, ignorance that's affecting the world, and above all the lack of truth-telling, the lack of truth. People are dying not so much from lack of water and food as lack of truth. And so that's my job, is to get truth recirculating, and your job is to help me. If you enjoy what I'm saying, share it, spread the word. We have to get a circulation of truth back in maximum, because people have too long been oppressed by the deliberate manipulation of an ignorant class that think they have the right to rule us when they don't. The only people that have the right to rule are those who are actually not going to be putting themselves forward to rule. The genuine, people that are compassionate and so on. Today is also the Saint's Day of Etheldreda, who was the founder of a great monastery and nunnery which became the great Cathedral of Ely. St. Etheldreda's Church in London does a lot of good work for peace. And she was from nobility. She was the sister of a king, married to kings and so on. But she gave it all up to become a simple nun. And she ate one meal a day. She lived very simply, and was the most famous saint in England, Anglo-Saxon England, for women. Audrey is her abbreviated name. So we also honour her today. So I'm speaking for that. I'm also director of the Institute of Peace Studies and Global Philosophy, so obviously I'll be talking about that. And, coordinator of Philosophers of Peace in Europe and helping around the world. So, okay, so I want to start by just saying how tragic it is that Chennai, Madras, a city I know and love well, where the chairman of the World Intellectual Forum lives, Swami Chaturvedi, a great Hindu sage in the tradition of Sri Ramanuja, has run out of water. It's unbelievable, a city of millions and millions of people. I'm not quite sure what's going on with water management in Chennai, but, dear friends, dear people of Chennai, please, get some water, get it together. We should drop everything and send them, Hercules planes loaded with water. I don't know how we do it, but there needs to be some serious help given to these dear people. Madras, or Chennai, is an incredible city. It's close to where the Theosophical Society headquarters is in Adyar. And when I visited with Swami Chaturvedi on two occasions, I had the opportunity to go to the Theosophical Society headquarters. I met the current General Secretary, who's a very nice American man. And I love that place, founded by Blavatsky and Colonel Olcott, visionaries. And it's also close to where St. Thomas ended up, my namesake. I've written a book of Thomas's. It's an endless project, I'd love to found an order of Thomases, because there's never been an order of St. Thomas. And yet Thomas was the most Gnostic and the most intellectual of all the disciples, in my opinion, having studied the Gospels with a fine-tooth comb, also having read his Gospel. And I think that's why Jesus sent him to India, because it's you know, you have to be pretty deep to even get an audience in India, because they're a nation of realized saints and sages themselves. So anyway, Thomas ended up in Madras, Chennai, and it became, you know, there's a Fort St George there, which has got a Christian church in it, where a lot of British history is. When I went to the church, I saw the visitors' book signed by Prince Charles, and you know, I think actually Lady Diana went with him on that occasion. So, but the people are without water. So this is, you know, we need to get that sorted. And also this raises the whole problem of global warming. I mean, it does seem that you know, India is experiencing a huge heat wave, and the Chennai problem is just one feature of that. People dying. I read some people just collapsed of heat in a train. I mean, I've been around India many times and I love it. You get used to the heat, but it's got ridiculous. And here in Europe, there's going to be a heat wave. So I think, and yet other parts of the world seem colder. So here in France, in the centre of France, it's very continental climate. It's either very cold or very hot. There doesn't seem to be, you know, a middle way. And today's a hot day. The information about global warming is very interesting, and the research that's needed. I'd love to see some balanced studies looking at all the evidence and how we can resolve it. My friend Professor Glenn Martin has just published a very, very interesting essay, a study of a book about global warming, in which he highlights the main scientific features that have been you know, discovered over the last decades. And the incontrovertible proof that yes, this is a phenomena, and its causes are not entirely known, but the increased CO2 levels are part of it, a major part of it. And Professor Glenn Martin has done a very good service to us all by you know, critiquing this book, because he says, look, it doesn't go far enough. What the author, I think it's called Rom, is saying is that capitalism's fine, everything's fine, hunky-dory, nationalism, carry on. We just need to tweak it a bit, and then global warming will go away. You know, leave it to the corporations, they'll sort it out. Kind of attitude, which Martin, quite rightly, who's a professor of philosophy at Radford in Virginia, and an old friend of mine, he's president of the Philosophers of Peace. He says, no, this is the wrong kind of thinking. Global warming raises a huge systemic challenge to the way we conduct our affairs in society. And capitalism as we know it has to be transformed. Capitalism as we know it at the moment, and as Marx critiqued it, and you know, many thinkers since, is about producing more and more goods, cheaper and cheaper, flooding the market and making a maximum profit. It never took into account the sustainability of the production process or the impact on nature. It never took account of its ecological imprint. It just assumed that you can have as many coal-fired furnaces burning in England and pump out as much iron as you want and dig up as many coal mines as you want. You know, it never had an ecological imperative at the back of its mind, capitalism. And when I went to Moscow and met you know, leading Russian philosophers, that's what they told me. That's what Gorbachev had realized. That's why they were going to transform the way Russia was doing things, because they also realized that communism needed to have a ethical, ecological basis for its critique of capitalism. Otherwise you just flip the other side and you do you do heavy damage to the environment, but in the name of the people instead of the name of the capitalists. Well, neither way is correct. There has to be a middle way of ecologically sensitive, socialist, liberal, democratic, civilized way of dealing with the problems. Glenn Martin also rightly points out that nationalism is a problem, and that we need some kind of internationalist agreement, some sort of federation whereby each nation state shoulders the burden of the solutions to the climate problems as we shoulder the burden of responsibility for them. And this is what the Paris Agreement was all about, that Macron and others signed. The fact that America just walks away from it is, as Glenn Martin points out, ethically and intellectually just ridiculous. I mean, there are the cabinet of Trump includes loads of climate change deniers who just want to carry on and do big business as usual. Well, no, it's they're the mouthpieces for the corporate system that want to carry on causing the problems. So what we need is also an economic system that produces for people's needs rather than their greed. This is the other point of Glenn Martin's critique, that capitalism is so harmful to the environment because it produces throwaway goods that have no sustainability. You buy one, you get one free, you get another one next year. It's a consumer-based discard society that doesn't build things for the long term. So we need a sort of ethical environmental audit of our whole production processes, whereby cars are made to last. Shavers are made to last. Everything is built with maximum life potential, instead of the current capitalist system, which is based on mass production and massive sales. So that's the thrust of Glenn Martin's critique, and he of course is also coordinator of the World Parliament Association, which has a constitutional plan for a world federal parliament whereby the people of the world can come together and discuss our common problems. I support that vision, and it's very interesting work. It was founded by an American back in the 70s who I met at the World Congress of Philosophy in Brighton back in the 1980s. And I've supported the Mondialist project in various forms ever since, which is why I support the European Union, because it's at least an attempt to integrate the European continent, to share our responsibilities and our duties and our pleasures and joys and all the creative and good things we can do as Europeans together, including the British Isles, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, England. I love all of Europe, I love all of the UK and the British Isles. So, yes, so thank you, Glenn, for that critique, and if anyone wants a copy, I can send it to them. And we need to do the deep thinking that can stop things like Chennai running out of water. We don't want it to get much worse. The world is in an emergency, and we need to all pull together and realise that. And this is why Greta Thunberg, the Swedish activist, has been going around speaking to parliaments and in the UK and so on. People are finally realising, yes, there is a problem. What they haven't realised is that it can't be just done by tweaking a bit. The solutions are much deeper, and this is why the Green parties of Europe, which did very well in the recent European elections, are saying we need a systemic change. The fundamental change that we need, and Glenn Martin rightly points this out as well, is that the single biggest polluter and user of carbon dioxide and raw materials on the planet is the military-industrial intelligence complex, which use vast resources. The single biggest of them is the USA Army and Navy and Air Force, which has a huge, huge budget and a carbon footprint that is reaches from here to the moon and back. So working for peace is also 100% working to solve our global ecological problems. What we hope, Glenn Martin, myself, and the others involved in the World Intellectual Forum and the Institute of Peace Studies and Philosophers of Peace and all the other things, is we need to transform the world's military expenditure, which is at the moment in the trillions, to 5% of its current level, within, I'd say, 10 years. And just as people get up in Parliament and talk about, reducing the carbon emissions by, I think we're committed in the UK to 25%, by 2050 or something, I can't remember. There was a debate about this during the Tory party leadership contest, and a very nice Green activist from Scotland rang in and challenged them to commit to an even faster rate. Yeah, this is great, but what I want to see is commitment to a cut in the world's military arms race and military expenditure from its current trillions to 5% of current levels. And I want that 90% of current expenditure to go into a big pot, a peace pot, which would be used for the Green New Deal. it's the only place we can get the money from, you know. And the armies of the world need to be converted into ecological emergency assistant, helps. So, for instance, the Indian army should be going into Chennai and bringing in water from wherever, and they need to construct plants around the Indian coast for desalination and so on, using solar technology, and people that have the know-how should be advising. I knew an Indian brigadier in the Indian Army who gave a lecture, Brigadier D'Souza, when my institute was just starting at the University of London back in '91. He gave us a lecture about the Indian Army having a new Green Brigade. He was the pioneer of this. Amazing, lovely man. He must be dead now. He's quite old now. And they were doing tree planting in the Himalayas. They were doing ecological work all over India. And they were an actual armed, a brigade, which he managed to get the Indian government to reassign to ecological activities. Well, that's what every army should be doing. And the saving on the military budgets that would be got by cutting it by 95% would go to this Green New Deal. And the people would be re-employed. They'd be like forest rangers instead of armed people out to kill you. And this can be done. This must and should and shall be done. And politicians need to get in on the act, and all the Green MEPs and others. We should be doing that in Europe. We should make, as a continent, an agreement to cut the combined military budget of Europe by 95% within 10 years. And that includes the UK, which I'm pretty sure and hoping, praying, is going to remain in the European Union. So later we'll be discussing this in Jaipur in December, as I said last lecture, in a Jain conference, because the Jains are very good at this. They've been doing ecological, living lifestyles for millennia. Mahavira, their current Tirthankara, laid down the absolute rule of non-violence. If you live by non-violence, you won't go wrong. And there are details about how to work that out. But what we're talking about is transforming society into a non-violent society. And this will be both good for the peace work that we're doing and also the environmental work. And then also there's going to be a conference in Calcutta, Professor Glenn Martin will be at, and others, in December after the Jaipur one, when they're going to be discussing the World Parliament Association and how we can get a world sort of parliamentary system going so that everybody can have a share in coming up with the solutions to the problems of the world and taking our share of it. So this is very important. I want to also mention in this short talk that how relieved I am that war didn't break out between America and Iran this last week, because it's touch and go. Apparently, according to the press, the American military are pushing Trump to launch a bombing assault on Iran. They've selected certain targets, a kind of rerun of what they did in Syria with the collusion and connivance of Theresa May and her illegal government putsch to push that war through without discussion in Parliament till afterwards. And lo and behold, Philip May, his company, Kapital, is funding the missiles that he used to fire on Syria, but also they're being used in Yemen. So these are the military-industrial intelligence people pushing for this war. Now Trump, bless him, I think it's the first amazing thing that he's done, and bless him, he said, no, I'm not going to do that. He was told there'd be 150 casualties, and this was supposed to be in response for the Iranians shooting down an unmanned drone with no casualties. And so Trump rightly said, if I'm hearing right, that he wasn't going to authorise that. And bless you, Mr. Trump, I take my hat off. Please do more of that, because he has a big enough personality, I think, to stand up to the military-industrial intelligence complex of America that hitherto has just run the US and assumes that, you just do what it says. Well, we'll see. I think Trump is his own man, and although 99% of his policies I don't really agree with, if he can stand up to the military-industrial intelligence complex, then that's a good sign. I don't agree, for instance, with his demand for extradition of Assange. And in that respect, he hasn't stood up against the military-industrial intelligence complex. He's completely kowtowed to it. So, the jury's out. What I have done, the initiative I took this last week, was when things were looking grim, the day before the solstice, I sent a letter to Trump and to the president of Iran, Rouhani, who I greatly admire, who's a very larger-than-life character and a very intelligent Muslim intellectual and seer, who gave a brilliant speech at the General Assembly inauguration this year at the UN. And I did offer the services of my multi-faith and multicultural mediation service to mediate this conflict between America, USA, and Iran, and the war of words that have been going on, the cancellation of the nuclear agreement by the Trump administration, and all that then ensues from this escalating war of words. My service is unique, and I wrote it up for my PhD thesis partly. It was founded in '96, and it's the only mediation service that deals with interfaith dialogue, that looks at religious conflict and its causes and solutions. And that is an undeniable factor in the Iran-US conflict. There's a mutual bridge of discourse failure between these two great cultures and these great nations. And a lot of Americans have this image of the Iranians as being, semi-barbarians and ignorant Muslims running around hitting themselves with whips. Whereas the Iranians think of the Americans as semi-barbarous Luciferians, all in their various esoteric Masonic cults, initiating virgins and stealing money off the poor and, doing satanic worship. They call it the Great Satan. So there's a huge, huge gulf of how can you bridge between these two different worlds, because Islam is against Satan, right? One thing you don't mess about with. If you read the Quran, is Iblis. Well, to the Iranian intellectuals, the Americans have sold out to Iblis. They've gone for greed, wealth, sex rather than love, etc., etc. And they're a diabolic nation. So they won't give in to the Americans. And if America hits them, it just proves the Iranians' point that this is the great Satan at work. And the little Satan is the UK, which always goes along with whatever America says. Well, anyway, look, we're at a very dangerous point in world history. But I've been here before, and as a philosopher, I know enough about both cultures. There are great thinkers in American history. There are great thinkers in Iranian history. I love both cultures. I have many friends in both Iran and the US. I've travelled in the US. I haven't yet had the good fortune to be in Iran, but I've travelled, around the area. I know Asia. I've many times been to India, and I've met many Iranians. And there are many parts of London which are, Iranian, so to speak, where I lived for many years and taught. And I've studied Iranian philosophy and spirituality. I've done a lot of work on the history of Zoroastrianism, studying at SOAS as part of my degree, and I have an immense respect for the Zoroastrian traditions of Iran and the way they coloured Islam. So when Islam came to Persia, it became Zoroastrianized. And from that, you got a much deeper form of spirituality, which gave birth to Sufism. And it gave birth to, the Illumination school of Surawadi. And they married this up with a Neoplatonic worldview that life is not what it appears. We're looking at illusions here. There's levels of reality behind this world. Henry Corbin, the great French Sufi expert, studied Iranian spirituality in great detail, and I've studied this stuff for years, and it's all going into my commentary on the Quran, which I'm in the process of just finalising. What I'm saying is America and Iran should sit down and have advanced philosophical seminars and discuss the nature of truth, because they have much more in common than they realise. The great the New Thought school of American spirituality, which was founded by Emerson and Thoreau and people, and gave rise to not only New England Transcendentalism, but then the whole burgeoning of American New Thought movement, which we call the New Age, loosely. This is all this is all from the same hymn sheet as Iranian spirituality. They speak the same language, they just don't realise it. So we have far more in common and at risk. And the same in England and Britain. There are many New Age teachers and people of advanced spirituality. We need to be working for peace here to prevent conflict between Iran and the US. And anyway, I've sent the letters, I'm waiting for a reply, and I'm going public with this. This is not secret work I'm doing. I'm what they call a public intellectual, in that I don't hide what I do. Some things are confidential, obviously, but as a druid, I work in the light, not in the dark. I don't sneak around behind the dark. In fact, I'm saying that's exactly what we shouldn't be doing, and that's what these so-called intelligence people are doing. I'm saying there's a higher level of intelligence work. It's called wisdom work, and that's what we should be doing. Let these stupid intelligence people plot and counterplot. And I mean, there's a wonderful passage in the Quran where it says, talking in the surah to do with spoils and Anfal, Surah 8, which is on when a Muslim should fight or not and how. And it says, a very moving passage, it says, yes, God knows all and sees all, and the enemy plots, and then other factions counterplot, and other people counterplot, but God is the greatest of all plotters, and is plotting ultimately for our collective victory. And that's the work of the wisdom agent. That's what I'm calling you. We humanity, all 6 billion of us, should become wisdom agents. That's our name, Homo sapiens. We have to reject these so-called intelligence operatives that are part of this military-industrial intelligence complex all over the world that are creaming off our money. Well, we need it back, thank you very much. And you can keep 5% of your budgets at the moment. And you can stop spying, and you can start meditating and getting wisdom work done. So that's my proposal. I've written to Trump and Rouhani. We'll see what happens. I sincerely hope that they listen, and if you are in touch with any Iranians or US citizens, please get them to go and do a hunger strike outside their respective presidents' homes and say, respond to Dr. Daffern's offer of mediation, please. Because I am 100% certain that if my mediation service got Trump and Rouhani in the same room, some neutral place, Geneva, wherever, and we sat down with interpreters and we talked this all through, we'd get a peace deal within a day, like a serious, lasting, forever peace deal, just like they did between the US and the USSR when it was thought impossible. Reagan and Gorbachev had the vision and the courage to step out of their respective nuclear bunkers and say, no, we will not destroy this planet. We are going to preserve it by doing a one-to-one peace diplomacy. That's what we need now. And that's what I'm calling on these leaders to do. Okay, so I want to say in response, following from that there's also been very encouraging signs in the Middle East, because there's a new peace plan floating about, promoted by Kushner, who is the son-in-law of Trump, and seems to be quite an intelligent young man. And he has called together this economic forum in Bahrain, to which many Middle Eastern countries are sending delegations, and he is proposing a comprehensive solution to the Israel-Palestine problem. And it's interesting, he must have been reading my speeches and notes over the years, because one of the things I've consistently called for, having been to Palestine, Israel, several times, and loving the region, loving Palestinian people and Israeli people equally and both and severally, they have to, if they're going to keep that crazy geography, there has to be a railway link and a road link put in between Gaza and the West Bank so that Palestine can actually exist as a country. And then the proper infrastructure can be put in, roads, railways, and then an airport and harbour for Gaza and so on. So it can begin to breathe and have a normal life and have an economic, sustainable, viable life. Because at the moment the people of Gaza are just crammed in like animals in a pen. It's unbelievably unacceptable that any civilized country would allow that to go on, as has been happening for far too long. And my Israeli friends that I know also feel the same. So, okay, so Kushner's put that on the table. I mean, he's been reading my notes. He's saying we need as part of this final settlement, there needs to be a transport link between the West Bank and Gaza, road and railway. And thank God somebody's been listening. And then he's trying to raise billions to pay for all this. Well, that's fantastic news, actually, and I hope that conference in Bahrain goes ahead and goes very well. Both the Palestinians and the Israelis are boycotting it. They've not been invited, apart from a few sort of lesser folk. It's probably a good thing, because there's so much bad blood between the Israelis and Palestinians that if they go, they will start shouting and grandstanding each other. They're not yet in a place where they can talk. What this conference is for everyone else, Middle East, to see what has to be done. I would want also the Commonwealth to be involved, because I know from my friend Afif Safia, who was Palestinian ambassador to London for many years, that Palestine then wanted to join the Commonwealth when it gets independence, which I think would be lovely. I think we should welcome them in. As a Canadian, as a Commonwealth citizen, as well as a UK citizen, I would say, please, Palestine, do join the Commonwealth. And then Commonwealth countries should support the rebirth of Palestine as a fantastic, amazing country full of amazing people. For God's sake, it's the birth of Christianity. And there are many Christians throughout Palestine, not just, in Gaza, there are many famous sacred churches. Gaza was a cradle of early Christian theology. And Palestine, the Palestine I would like to see birth would be a non-violent ahimsa project. It would be sworn like Mubarak Awad, its great Gandhian figure, to non-violence. Sari Nasabi, who was rector of the University of Jerusalem, the Arab University of Jerusalem, which I visited, and who is on our World Intellectual Forum. He's the greatest authority on Aristotelian philosophy in the Arab world, the Islamic world. Palestinians are intellectuals on a level, bar none. And so we would have a wisdom race between Israel and Palestine. Let them work on ecological problems together, let them solve the problems of water in that whole region, and gradually build trust through bilateral projects and so on, and have a firm non-violence treaty between the two countries. So Kushner's doing a good job, and I sincerely hope that it happens, and that that they get there. But it won't happen until and unless we get a peace and non-violence treaty agreed. So let's just pray that this happens. Okay, so you can say to me, yeah, but what about, it looks like Israel might have killed old Yasser Arafat. I spoke last week about evidence that's emerged in an Al Jazeera documentary that shows that he was murdered. Well, okay, so part of the deal is coming clean and finding the truth. If that's really true, if some Israeli hawks thought that that's a good idea and took the steps under Ariel Sharon's era, well, it's disgraceful. And part of the cleansing and purification that's needed to bring peace is to be truthful and honest and own up about this stuff. You see, secrecy, lies, and covering up is what leads to violence and war and pain. Truth is what sets people free, as St. John said. And that's in the Anglican Cathedral of St. John the Divine in New York, which is a cathedral I know and love very well. It's right there on a plaque in the floor, and that's the mothership of the entire Anglican communion around the world, by the way. And it says there, the truth shall set you free. So that's what we should be doing. We're truth protectors, okay? So good luck with all that. Then there's Britain and Brexit and Boris Johnson. I just want to comment on that because, oh good Lord, it's so ridiculously absurd that even anybody would ever contemplate someone like Boris Johnson becoming a